My dear students, today we are going to discuss consequence of tort, that is wrongful act, legal damage and remedy. Introduction. Tort law protects civil rights outside of criminal and contract law, such as property, personal security, goodwill and reputation. The wronged party can claim monetary damages from the tortfeasor. To be considered a tort, there must be some sort of wrongdoing on the part of the defendant, either in the form of an act or a failure to act. In cases where taking no action would be negligent, you could be held liable. Harm resulting from carelessness falls within the jurisdiction of tort law. Injured parties have the right to seek compensation under the law from the legally obligated party. Article 372 of the Indian Constitution has been construed to maintain the common law elements that underpin India's tort law, which itself is founded on English law. In the case of Building Supply Corporation versus Union of India, this is of 1965, the Supreme Court of India affirmed this application. The action of tort arises when there is a civil wrong against a person. The first reported use of the term tort was in the case of Bolton versus Hardy, that was in 1597, as mentioned by Salmond. Now we will discuss the essentials of tort. First, act or omission, that is inappropriate behavior or inaction. Second, we have damages. The wrongdoer must pay monetary compensation for the injury caused by his act or omission. And the last one is remedy. The wrongdoing must be legally redressable. Now coming to the first point, that is wrongful act. First and foremost, in order for there to be a tort, there must have been an act or omission that was wrong. In other words, there must have been a violation of some legal duty. So, the legal question is, what is a duty? If a person is expected to act as a reasonable person, would in a certain situation, it could indicate that his actions are constrained by law. To commit wrongdoing, one must act contrary to what a reasonable and wise person would do in the same situation. A person may be negligent, willful, or in breach of strict duty when they commit a wrongful act, which may take the form of a positive action or an omission. A person can be held liable for a positive wrongful act or omission in negligence, battery, or breach of strict duty. For instance, if he drives his motorcycle at an excessive speed in violation of the law or fails to perform a duty as required by law, or if he beats another person out of revenge, or if he keeps a lion on his land and the lion escapes and injures someone on the road. However, it is important to keep in mind that a violation of a merely moral or religious obligation will not suffice. The responsibility in the question must be one that is principally defined by law. For instance, Miss A, once gravely ill and home alone, she begged her next door neighbor B to watch out for her. B did this by bringing her necessary medications, preparing meals and serving her. She recovered and later B felt it when unexpectedly home alone. He then asked Miss A to be his caretaker. B endured great hardship and eventually got crippled because of Miss A never granted his request. Since this is a moral obligation rather than one established by law, Miss B has no legal recourse against Miss A. There can be no legal recourse for violating religious or social obligations that are not mandated by statute. In this regard, the case of Dhadfele versus Gurav, that is in 1881, is noteworthy. Dhadfele, a servant at a Hindu temple, had the legal authority to take the offerings meant for the temple's idol. So the defendant, Mr. Gurav, owed the idol food, but he did not give it to it. The employee sued him for compensation after suffering financial losses. The court ruled that the defendant had no duty to feed the temple's servant, and even if he failed to do so, it would be a breach of religious duty and the plaintiff would have no legal recourse for any resulting damages. Similarly, in Rogers versus Rajendra Dutt, the court ruled that the complainant must be legally wrong as to complaining party because of the consequences. That is, it must adversely impact him in some way. It is not sufficient that it will immediately inflict harm in his interest. Therefore, it is necessary for the law to establish duty from the outset. A person is not guilty of breaking the law if his actions were involuntarily or motivated by an immediate threat to his safety. Again, an act or omission will not be considered illegal or improper if it is done for a valid reason. A police officer who, in pursuit of a thief, enters Miss B's property without permission will not be held for trespass because he had a reasonable cause to do so. If an act is not a legal damage or wrong, then the fact that it was done maliciously does not make it so. If damage has happened due to an act or omission on the wrongdoer's part that is actively or passively the effect of his violation, the wrongdoer cannot use the fact that he did not intend to create the damage as a defense to an action in tort. To the extent that fraud or malice are essential to his act or omission, ignorance of law is no defense. Every man is assumed to know and intend the common and usual results of his actions. There are three types of wrongdoings in our world: malfeasance, misfeasance, and non-feasance. It covers a wide range of wrongdoings, including trespass, for which there is no need to prove carelessness or malice before taking legal action. Misfeasance refers to the poor execution of a legal duty. Non-feasance refers to the failure or refusal to carry out a duty or responsibility. To be held liable for a tort, a person must have committed an act that can be considered negligent because it infringes the rights of another person. Up to this particular point, my dear students, we have understood that in essentially to constitute a tort, we should need at least wrongful act or omission from the side of the defendant. Otherwise, it will not categorize itself in the premises of torts. Now, let us understand with this particular point with an example. Say, for example, you are growing a tree in your premises and the branches of that particular tree, without no fault of yours, are entering in the premises of your neighbor. What is the legal remedy does that neighbor has with you? Can he sue you for the tree that you have grown on your land, or could he sue you for your inaction to cut the branches or trim the branches of that particular tree to grow within your premises? Just think for a second and answer this. The obvious answer would be, is it my fault that my trees and its branches are growing in the my neighbor's premises? The answer would be no. Now, when you categorize this particular situation in the torts, you will understand that yes, it is your responsibility when you are in the possession of something which could escape the boundaries of its lawful owner and intrude in the boundaries of the neighbor or any person who has nothing to do with that particular property. It constitutes tort. It is your responsibility to ensure and enforce the law which is suitable for you also, and it should not create a hindrance in the lawful enjoyment of the individual who happens to be your neighbor. This particular part was focused by the judge in the case of Raylands versus Fletcher, which is also called the absolute liability. Say, for example, you are petting or you are domesticating a wild animal. It is your responsibility under law to keep a hold and a tab on the wrongdoings of that particular animal. If he escapes, he is going to create a disturbance for the neighbors. You will be held liable. Now, in this particular part, it is also to be understood that the individual who happens to be your neighbor can claim the damages, irrespective of the fact that he may or he may not have encountered any losses. So, the law puts you in a situation wherein you have to maintain your belongings and your possessions in a way that they do not interfere in the lawful enjoyment of the property or the person of other persons. Now, let us understand this with another example. Now, say for example, you are constructing a building and it is your duty to protect the passerbys from the undue interference from your construction material to their rightful enjoyment of right to path. If they do not follow the instructions displayed by you on the board outside your premises, then it is not their fault. It's you who has to maintain the construction material and the individuals involved in the construction in such a way that the individuals who happen to be the passers-by having the rightful enjoyment of the path. Next, we have legal damage. Legal damage, often known as infringement of private rights, is the second essential element of tort and serves as the ultimate litmus test for whether or not an act or omission was legally unlawful. A violation of a duty does not make a person a tortfeasor unless there is injuria, that is infringement of private legal right. Let's take an instance. It takes an injury for a wrong side motorcycle driver's violation of a legal duty to be actionable in tort. There must be a legal damage caused by a wrongdoing. In general, a tort is an act committed by one person that injures another and for which the injured party sues the perpetrator. The terms damage and damages need to be understood in this context. To suffer harm or to be deprived of anything is to suffer damage. Nevertheless, damages refer to the monetary recompense sought by the victim and granted by the court. The parties request damages and the court grants them. Damage refers to actual loss or pain regardless of whether it constitutes an actionable wrong, while injury refers only to the legal wrongs. Two adages, Daminum sine injuria and injuria sine damino, show the true weight of legal damage. Many destructive acts are not wrong and the person harmed by them has no legal recourse because of the doctrine of Daminum sine injuria, that is damage without injury. Daminum sine injuria, sometimes known as harm without injury, refers to such action and their consequences. A tort will not exist if there is a damage but no violation of legal right. They are examples of harm that could have been avoided but for justifiable actions. Even if someone else has harmed because of your actions or inaction, you can't be held liable if it was in support of your legitimate business interest or when you were using your property legally. The plaintiff schoolmaster in the Gloucester Grammar School master case of 1410 was deemed to have no legal standing to lodge a complaint over the establishment of a new school. All that was lost was time and money, a case of simple Daminum sine injuria. No action rests for simple injury, however severe, caused without the infringement of some right, as amply illustrated by the case of Acton versus Blundell of 1848, in which a mill owner drained off subsurface water flowing into the plaintiff's well. Even though they result in substantial harm, the law offers no recourse for many types of moral wrongs, unless it is the result of a type of wrong to which the law takes no cognizance. Loss or detriment is not a good ground for action. Infringement of a legal private right without real loss or harm is also known as injuria sine damino, that is injury without damage. The injured party has a valid claim for damages in this particular situation. He does not have a right to show any unusual harm, as any impairment of man's right constitutes harm in himself. A violation of person's right to property, personhood immunity, or liberty gives rise to a cause of action and of itself. Therefore, actual observable injury is not required as the basis of an action. If a right is violated, the law will presume the harm has occurred. Assault, battery, false imprisonment, libel, trespass on land, and similar wrongdoings all are examples of actionable wrongdoings that need not to show any particular injury. If the plaintiff can prove no actual loss, the court must still pay them nominal damages. In Ashby versus White, a case from a parliamentary election definitely established this principle when the plaintiff was unlawfully barred from casting his ballot by the defendants, the returning officers. The election was a success for the candidate who had the plaintiff's support. Nonetheless, he filed suit against the defendants, claiming they intentionally debarred him from casting a ballot in the election and should pay him damages as a result. Lord Holt ruled in favor of plaintiff, awarding damages due to the violation of a right properly belonging to the plaintiff. The next part of the discussion is remedy. The law of torts is formalization of the adage ubi jus ibi remedium, which states that where there is a wrong, there is a remedy. If plaintiff suffers physical, material, psychological, economic, or relational injury as a result of the defendant's carelessness, the court may award compensatory damages. The duty to make restitution for damages produced by unlawful conduct stems from the fault, not the purpose, regardless of whether the fault was due to malice, negligence, or recklessness. The purpose of remedy in tort law is to put the injured party back in the same position they were in before the tort was committed. This is not meant to be criminal punishment for the defendant. There are both judicial and non-judicial options for redress. When a party needs a remedy that can only be obtained through the courts, the term judicial remedy is employed. Taking the law into one's own hands is an example of extrajudicial remedy which should not be used. There are three distinct types of legal redresses. First is damages, restoration of damaged property, injunction. Types of damages. The claimant should be compensated in full for his loss, and this is the starting point for any damage calculation. To the extent that can be accomplished through the monetary compensation, he is entitled to be put back in the position he would have been in the tort had not been committed. In circumstances of tort, monetary damages are usual method of compensation. Do not mix damages with damage, which is the plural version of the word damage and denotes the injury or harm. Damages for disgrace. To show that the plaintiff's case is so trivial that it has wasted the court's time, the court may award the plaintiff a nominal sum of money as damages even when the court finds that the plaintiff's right has been violated. In nominal damages, the plaintiff incurs no actual loss, while in the contemptuous damages, the plaintiff incurs some genuine damage, but it is so tiny that he does not merit full compensation. To take the case of Green and Brown, who live next door to each other but have always been at odds. One day, Green's dog trespassed into Brown's property and relieved itself there. The disgusted Brown sues Green for trespass and for failing to control his dog after he steps in the dog's poo. The judge will side with B, but because the case is so minor, he or she will only award B nominal damages. Next is the monetary compensation. The purpose of compensatory damages is to put the plaintiff back in the same financial position he was in before the tort occurred. Damages are meant to compensate the victim for his losses rather than punish the offender. These damages are especially helpful when the loss is quantifiable in money. The court can simply order the defendant to pay the plaintiff that amount so that he can buy new goods or replace the ones that were destroyed. For instance, suppose K borrows T's bike and then proceeds to crash it. If K is awarded compensatory damages, T will cover the cost of repairing the bike to its pre-accident condition. Next, we have punitive or exemplary damages. Punitive damages are awarded where the defendant has been willfully and widely negligent in causing the plaintiff any harm at all. The purpose of this punishment is to serve an example to the public and deter others from engaging in similar behavior. Therefore, punitive damages are awarded to the plaintiff whenever the court finds that the defendant's conduct was particularly egregious. Next, we have added damages. Additional harm to the plaintiff beyond what can be compensated by compensatory damages, such as plaintiff's loss or self-respect, mental agony and physical pain, may be awarded in the form of punitive damages. Therefore, the plaintiff receives these damages in addition to the compensation for his financial loss. Next, indirect and direct damages. General damages are based on the extent of the plaintiff's actual loss. For instance, if the plaintiff suffers financial loss or medical discomfort as a result, or if their quality of life is diminished. When an exceptional loss can be proven, extraordinary damages are awarded. No universal solution exists for figuring out the precise sum. The burden of proof rests solely on the plaintiff to demonstrate actual damage. Just a few examples include having to pay for things like medical bills, lost wages, and fixing or replacing damaged or stolen items. Next, we have injunctions. To enforce applicants' legal rights, the court may issue an injunction prohibiting or requiring the execution of a certain action. According to Section 37 of the Specific Relief Act, injunctions can be either temporary or permanent. Temporary injunction. A temporary or interlocutory injunction is issued when a lawsuit is pending in order to preserve the status quo and avoid further harm until a judgment is made by the court. It prevents the defendant from committing the same or similar breaches in the future. Next is the permanent injunctions. After hearing arguments from both the parties, the court may give a ruling that includes a permanent injunction. A court order is final and binding because of the legal authority behind it. Next is return of identified property. The third type of judicial remedy available in tort law is specific restitution of property. A person has a right to the return of his property and the things if they were taken from him in violation of law. Tort remedies outside the court system are available for situations where legal action is unnecessary. The applicable law is agreed upon by the parties. The term extrajudicial remedies for torts refer to the options available to a victim for a wrongdoing outside the court system. If you have been the victim of a civil wrong, you can seek one of 5 distinct extrajudicial tort remedies. The law allows a property owner to use reasonable force to evict an intruder and regain access to their property. Now, coming to the conclusion, the student should take a pragmatic approach to tort liability, as there is no such thing as an exhaustive categorization of torts beyond which courts should not advance. Courts have the largely shaped tort law as they have progressed from ancient to modern times. Wrongdoings should be read correctively, efficiently, and effectively to ensure that aggrieved parties satisfied. There are both judicial and non-judicial options for redress. Damages-based remedies are intended to put the plaintiff back in the same position he or she was in prior to the tort-related injury, or where he or she should have been if the tort had never been occurred. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. Thank you very much for the patience listening.